right, let's start with a story. Once upon a time, there was a college quarterback playing ball on the West Coast who was pretty damn good. Maybe not a generational talent, not an elite athlete, but clearly one of the best prospects at the most valuable and unique positions in all of sports. He was a natural passer and highly accurate with the football, so what he lacked in high-tier athleticism, he made up in traditional skills that the NFL usually covets in a quarterback. Problem was, he was kind of a dick, according to NFL pundits and scouts. See, his father was a big deal. He was powerful and well-connected and wealthy. So this kid was the son of a rich man, and I probably am not the first person to tell you that rich men's sons aren't always the best. And throughout this kid's college career, he had a lot of success in the field, but off the field, he rubbed people the wrong way. He wasn't a bad kid. He didn't get into any legal trouble, no issues with women or other criminal activity or anything. His teammates loved him, and he held down his teammates, but the combination of his father and his persona was going to hold him back. He gave off bad vibes in interviews. He didn't seem like he needed the game or loved the game the way the NFL teams tend to want, especially their QBs, to love the game of football. That said, even with all of that controversy, most scouts had him as the consensus second or maybe even third best QB prospect in that year's draft. Unfortunately for him, the scouts and pundits don't make the picks, and he wasn't the top quarterback on everyone's board. And when the draft begun, he ended up sliding much, much further than he expected. All the way to the 10th overall pick to the Arizona Cardinals in the 2018 NFL Draft, because this was a white man named Josh Rosen. I start this video off with Josh Rosen's story because it's eerily similar to what's happening to one Sheduer Sanders, except the outcome for Shadur is looking much, much worse. And once you break down things, really, really ugly. For those who don't know, Sheduer Sanders is a college quarterback who was recently drafted into the NFL, except for the fact that he was drafted much, much later than really any reasonable person would have expected him to be drafted based on the knowledge we had at the time. And this is very unique in a lot of ways. Shadur was the consensus second best quarterback in this draft. And although quarterback is one of the most important and hard to find positions in all of sports, and although there were around 10 teams basically that needed a quarterback talent such as his, he was undrafted until 5 other quarterbacks went before him, 3 of which at least were definitely inferior talents by pretty much every measure. And really it was after those other 3 quarterbacks got drafted that I had to kind of face the fact that there were some familiar ugly forces at play that caused his slide. And even though I'm not a huge Sheduer Sanders fan, I saw this situation as an opportunity to show people how those forces work, not just in his situation, but in so many situations for black people and black men specifically. And when I see memes like this that make it seem like race wasn't at all involved in this situation, it really does show me how much further we have to go to have people's race politics be any way more complex than saying the N-word is bad and the KKK is bad and Nazis are bad, usually. Like, I know I had even black people in my comment section not catching what was happening here, and it's because y'all motherfuckers don't watch my sports videos. Well, y'all better watch this one, because I be talking that shit and y'all don't be listening. Before I begin, I want to put out there that I don't have a strong opinion on Sheduer Sanders. In fact, I think he's probably a dickhead. And while his father is one of the most iconic, influential black men of my lifetime, I've also been openly critical of him as well. It's also important to point out that this is not Emmett Till 2025. This is not a public lynching, and some of y'all need to calm the fuck down. Like, I see people like, go to Shadur's page and buy his merch on his website, #legendary. Like, y'all, this boy is already a millionaire. This is an injustice, but like, come on, take your tongue out his ass for a second, like chill out. But I do think there's a clear racially motivated message that was being sent to Shadur, and anyone that thought they were gonna be like Shadur or be influenced by his behavior that was sent in the last couple of days. To start, many naysayers would present one of the following excuses to say why this isn't about race. They'll say Shadur wasn't that good, Shadur wasn't better than the QBs picked ahead of him, Shadur and or his dad did things that warrant and explain how far he's fallen in the draft. They'll point out that 2 other black quarterbacks were picked before him. All of those are bad. Those are all bad arguments that don't hold up to scrutiny, but we'll start with the how good was he really argument. According to Mock Draft Database, a website that compiles nearly 200 player rankings and over 1,500 different mock drafts done by professionals of varying levels, Sheduer Sanders was the #2 quarterback and the 12th ranked player overall out of 250 or whatever. And this isn't just like silly play rankings done by super fans or content creators. This is not Tom Grossi and his homies doing a fan draft on a podcast. These are professional sports journalists and analysts, people that watch film, that have access to a lot of information that we don't, that talk to a lot of people. And no, not all of them had Shadur as a #2 quarterback, but the overwhelming majority did.
Number one for us is Sheduer Sanders. And Don, I personally put him #1. Just 4 years of outstanding production, whether it be at Jackson State or at Colorado. 80+ PFF grade in all 4 years. His grade improved every single year as a starter as well. He reads defenses like an NFL quarterback already. He is a pure distributor of the football. Much before that was a negative with Jackson Dart, how he really locks on to one receiver. Every mouth is fed when Sheduer Sanders is playing quarterback for Colorado. Incredibly accurate to all levels of the field. His touch is spectacular.
I tried everything I could to move him down. That's the way that I kind of, as I got into more and more of the film and saw more and more of the projected players being drafted, I was looking for reasons to move him down because the film wasn't making sense to me that he should be a top, 1 overall pick or even a top 10 pick. It just wasn't making sense to me. Then going back and seeing where everyone else in this class is, I don't think you can deny the fact that Sheduer Sanders is a polished prospect, meaning that he is very fundamental. I think you can tell he's been coached well and at a high level for a long time. I think he plays extremely intelligent. He's an intelligent football player, makes smart decisions the vast majority of the time. He's in a situation.
Two is Sheduer Sanders, Colorado.
Same. All right, Shadur. This guy, you've been a Shadur guy this entire time, Sam.
Yeah, it feels like he's polarizing, and yet I don't think he actually is. Like, every time you sort of mention his name, there are people either on Twitter or in the chat or whatever, like, the guy's, he's like a second, third round guy. He's undraftable. He's like, there's always like hyperbole surrounding him, and yet everyone seems to basically come down to the idea that he's QB2 in this draft.
There are multiple stories that the New York Giants even had Shadur as their #1 quarterback before meeting him at the scouting combine. And regardless of what might have happened at that combine interview to change their mind, that alone rejects this idea that he wasn't that good and that teams didn't think his on-field talent was good. Now, this also doesn't mean that he should have automatically been the 2nd overall pick. I didn't have much to say when he wasn't the 2nd QB to go. When the Giants took Jackson Dart, I was like, hey, shit like that happens. When the 3rd quarterback was a 25-year-old guy that could barely throw as far as we could tell, I started getting a little suspicious. But when he was passed up by 2 more QBs that were definitely less talented than him, I had to put on my Hotep hat for a minute and start writing this essay. So yeah, Shadur is not an elite or generational QB prospect. As alluded to earlier, he does not have elite athleticism or elite arm strength. Most people saw him as likely a mid-level starter at the position, somewhere in that Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan range. But in the NFL, that's a huge value to have, because a below mid-level quarterback is a good way to get everybody on the team fired. Upgrading from a trash or nothing QB, like say the Giants or Saints or Browns or Steelers, going from that to a solid starter is a huge deal, more than worth 1 first-round pick. Or using a high pick on a quarterback of the future when your current quarterback is questionable or old would have been great for teams like the Rams or the Raiders or the Seahawks, maybe even the 49ers. But all of those teams passed on him multiple times until the Browns finally took him in the 5th round after taking another QB in the 3rd round, the 5'10" journeyman college football player. Like, being a journeyman college quarterback does not... Anyway, understand that QB is, again, the most critical and valuable position in all of sports. It takes an absurd amount of talent to play it at a high level, and NFL teams value the position so much that even mid-level quarterbacks can command 3 times as much as mid-level players at any other position. And high-level quarterbacks are making more than anyone else in the league. We're probably going to see a quarterback sign $1 billion deal in the next 10 to 15 years. Conversely, this also means that getting a rookie quarterback like Shadur can be a huge advantage to a team if he's good, because rookie players in the NFL make a standardized salary based on their draft spot, not on their on-field position. So a quarterback that's drafted will only make maybe 25% of what a mid-level quarterback makes, let alone a high-level quarterback. And they might make even less than that, like Brock Purdy, who was basically playing quarterback at a high level for free for the last 4 years. That means that a team can take all that extra money and get better players at a high level or at different positions and possibly try to win a Super Bowl. So understand, all these teams passed up on that opportunity, one of the most valuable opportunities you can have as a football team. Now, I'm sure there's some, at-home scouts that will try to nitpick things about Shedur's ability and he holds the ball too long and this thing happened on film. And that's fine. It's ultimately subjective though. Understand, if Sheduer was overrated coming out of college, even if there were some teams that were not as high on him as analysts and pundits were, you can't deny that the big board was the big board, and that's what numerous people said. And even if he was overrated, what happened to him is an extreme anomaly that has never happened before in the history of the NFL. A quarterback that is seen as a high-ranked talent has never slid as far as Sheduer did. The only comparison that can be made is maybe Sam Howell from a few years ago, but you won't find any type of consensus that he should have been a first-round pick or even the top QB in that draft. And that was a historically weak QB class where there was only one quarterback taken in the first round all the way at 20, and the second one wasn't taken until the third round. In this draft, still a weak QB class, there were 5 taken in the first 3 rounds, 2 in the first round and 1 in the second. This was not a matter of talent or need or value. Anyone that thinks that his on-field performance alone explains why this happened doesn't know shit about football and is not to be taken seriously. This doesn't mean he was the best QB ever. This doesn't mean he's going to be the steal of the draft. He might be out the league in 3 or 4 years, just like the aforementioned Josh Rosen. But the way things have played out thus far are separate from that possible outcome. The draft is a crapshoot, only a fraction of players pan out. That's why you take these chances when you have them. So no, all of the argument about his talent is invalid. Now, what can be debated somewhat is whether or not the combination of Sheduer's talent and his off-field concerns might have changed the way teams ranked him. But here's where things start to get complicated. As I said earlier, Sheduer is a rich man's son, and historically, that has been a recipe for questionable character in young men. It's a story as old as time, both in real life and fiction. Batman, Tony Stark, RFK, JFK, probably a couple other people in their family. You can go down the line, Chet Hanks.
Psych! Pussyclot! Fuck them, Ross!
Like, this is a story as old as time. But what makes it more complicated is the rich man in question, Deion Sanders. And we got to take a detour because so much of this story is really about Deion and his presence and legacy in the NFL. Deion Sanders is one of the greatest football players of all time, the greatest who ever played his position. But more importantly, Deion Sanders is the literal inventor of modern day black masculine swag. I've talked about this before in other videos, but in short, whatever you think is cool that black men are doing in 2025, whether it be a style of dress or jewelry or a way of talking, understand that it stems from things that Deion Sanders did for black masculinity back in 1995. Or really back in 1989 when he was first drafted appropriately by the Atlanta Falcons with the 5th overall pick. And I just want you to see the way this man looks in 1989. Minus the Jerry curl, of course, because that was still in style. But if you look at Deion Sanders and you look at the way players are looking even today when they're getting drafted, you see the difference. This is not how black men presented before he made this popular. Deion was ungovernable from jump. Famously, he said during an interview that leading up to the draft, he ended up in a meeting with the New York Giants and they tried to give him a test that he didn't feel like doing. So he walked out of the meeting saying, y'all aren't gonna be able to draft me because you're not gonna have a high enough pick anyway. And he gave him the deuces. He was that sure that he was going that high and he did not care how they felt about it.
Into this room and the Giants was there. And it was the Giants room and they had people sitting down taking these tests. What do they call these things?
Oh, yeah, like the psychology test, right?
I mean, the thing was that thick, man. And I sat down and they gave me this thing. And what is this? They say, it's this test and, we need you to take it. I said, oh, what pick do you have? It's like the 10th. I said, I'll be gone for then. So I got up and walked out. I'll be gone. I'll be way gone before then.
Now, it's important to recognize that Deion was just carrying on a tradition inherited from the likes of Muhammad Ali and a little bit of Billy D. Williams, maybe Rick James, many others. The cool pose, good old exaggerated swag. That is not something that Deion created, but it's something that he crystallized into a lot of what we see today. Being bigger than life, being somewhat of an anti-hero anti-hero, maybe even a villain or a heel. That's what Deion wanted to do on purpose early in his career. He said himself that because he was playing the position of cornerback, a position that wasn't the highest paid in the NFL, that he wanted to make sure that he would always be at the top of the NFL food chain in terms of notoriety and popularity. So he created a character, a brand, Prime Time, to draw attention and ensure that he would become a star bigger than the game itself. And in doing that, he's influenced the last 30 years of how black men see themselves and how they want to be seen by the world. When you see players getting drafted and they have big custom chains around their necks with their nicknames, that's Deion Sanders. When you see them in flamboyant, colorful suits, that's Deion Sanders. When you see them high step into the end zone and then do a little dance when they get there, that's Deion Sanders. That's all Deion. For the first half of his career, he was greatly hated for this behavior. He played the heel well, and he did it on purpose because he knew that there was a history of this type of character working for this reason, but it could only work if he was the best. And he wasn't quite there yet, so he calmed things down a bit going into the second half of his career. After leaving the Falcons, he won 3 Super Bowl championships and played the political game more. And the combination worked, and he was granted access to more opportunities after his playing days were over. He was still over the top in a lot of ways, but it felt less abrasive. And the key was you couldn't say shit to him at that point in time because for all the arrogance and shit talking he did, he backed it all up. But it didn't mean that some didn't hate him, maybe to this day, and wanted to take him down a peg for not behaving as he was supposed to, for being too daring and ungovernable, for not being appreciative enough for the game. In many ways, Deion Sanders epitomizes black excellence, but that's not necessarily a good thing, and we'll come back to that later. The most status quo threatening thing he had done in recent years was become the head coach of Jackson State University, a small HBCU in Alabama. This was a huge deal because Deion was suddenly doing black excellence in the way we often imagine it. He was a black man that achieved so much while being unapologetically black, and he had become influential, and he was suddenly using that influence to help other black people at a level that was possibly threatening to the institutions that usually control college football. No one in normal college football would have given him a head coaching job at that point in time, but at HBCU would because they had nothing to lose and plenty to gain. And even if Deion wasn't a great coach, his star power and attention would draw a lot of money to the school and they would benefit from that. And that also meant he would probably draw a lot of the best players in the country to attend a school they probably never would have done in the first place. NCAA football is big business at the highest levels, and the best players are going to try to make it to the NFL through the NCAA by playing for the top NCAA teams. So this means that HBCUs like Jackson State will rarely have highly sought after talent. At best, they'll get diamonds in the rough on accident who still make it to the NFL, but for the most part, they're surviving on leftover players not good enough for big time college football. That changed with Deion Sanders as almost immediately he captured the #1 recruit in the country, Travis Hunter, a 5-star recruit from Georgia who went on to win the Heisman Trophy this past year and had a career like no other in NCAA history, and then became the 2nd overall pick in this year's draft. This was a player that other schools would have been spending tons of time and effort recruiting, and he went to a legitimately inferior school because he, like many other players, was inspired by Deion Sanders. This really shook up the NCAA, and you could tell so much shade was thrown at Deion by other coaches. He was playing the game wrong and not respecting and knowing his place. When he was a player and not knowing his place, it was fine because he was still very much beholden to the overall structure of the NFL. But as a coach, as a person with real power and influence, he was suddenly threatening the system. What would happen if other players did what Travis Hunter did? The best players in college football are all black. And college football is a multi-billion-dollar industry that relies on those players being on PWI teams so that those teams get the money and the institution functions the way it always has functioned. The labor and talent of these black players was not meant to benefit black colleges. This could not be allowed. But in the end, Deion did what many black excellence types do. He bought back into the system using the work he had put in. I'm not saying he's a sellout. I'm saying he literally bought in. This is problematic, but not as bad. The system recognized that he was a threat to them, and so it made space for him to join. So he went from Jackson State to the University of Colorado, and he took his son with him. Now you might think that once he got to Colorado, he would shrink back down and play the game, but no, he was still very much Coach Prime. He didn't play the humble, grateful Negro, just happened to have an opportunity. He felt like he deserved the opportunity, and he did not play by the normal rules. He brought rappers and celebrities to Colorado, and as usual, he backed it up. Colorado had won 1 game before he got there, but 2 years later they won 9 and were close to being in the college football playoffs, even though they had still on paper a far inferior team than much of their competition. What this shows is that Deion historically has a very specific way of dealing with the white ran power systems around him, whether it be the media, the NFL, the NCAA, or whatever. He will submit to the will of the system, but he's gonna have fun and do it his own way while he's inside of it. And you will respect him for his ability to deliver on his braggadocious personality, because he is going to work harder and be better than most everyone in his lane. Deion is not gonna let anyone not treat him with the respect he thinks he deserved. I'll never forget the interview that he left as a head coach, and when a reporter thought it'd be funny to refer to him as Deion instead of Coach Deion.
Hey, Deion, I was just wondering if you could...
Oh, hold on, let's back up a little bit. You don't call Nick Saban Nick. Don't call me Deion. Treat me like Nick.
Okay, Deion.
That's Deion Sanders in a nutshell. And it would seem that this energy rubbed off into all 3 of his sons, with Shadur being the youngest and most talented of them all. But Shadur didn't inherit his father's elite athleticism, as I said earlier, but he did inherit his hard work ethic, commitment to excellence, good looks, and of course, his swag and ego. But the issue is that while Deion earned his spot the hard way, the way the institutions like the NFL want their players to earn, Shadur had the audacity to get his spot the same way many far less talented white men have gotten throughout American history or even world history. Shadur is a good player, but he's also a Nepo baby. Regardless of his ability as a player, that is the truth. His best qualities as a QB, accuracy, touch passing, understanding the pocket, yada, 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 that comes from having the best trainers that a player can buy for his entire life, literally being friends with Tom Brady. Shadur isn't the first player to have a former player as a father. Plenty of others can say that their fathers were players, other players drafted high, but only a few have a father who was as visible, as involved, and as demonstrative of their involvement as Deion Sanders, and none were the type of black that Deion was giving. I saw someone post once that if Sheduer Sanders was the son of a single mother with 6 kids and no father, the NFL media would love showering him with all the attention and praise about his resilience and character. But instead, Shadur acts like entitled trust fund kids have acted throughout history. He doesn't act like anyone is doing him any favors by including him or giving him the spot that he's in. From where he sits, he has the talent to be where he is, and his daddy paid his way into that. And I think it's ironic and very hypocritical that so many people are mad at this, but I understand that white people have always hated this level of mimicry when we do it. I'd argue this is also why Bronny James got so much negativity this year. People were calling him undeserving and not an NBA talent, but when you look at his stats, especially in the G League with other developmental players, it's clear he belonged there. It's just that some people do not like this image of a dominant black father figure paving the way through force and influence for their sons. That's not how this is supposed to work. Black people have never been meant to participate in this country in the same way that white people do. To be clear, this is not me defending rich kid behavior or the ego-driven actions of Deion or even LeBron for that matter. I'm not a nepotism fan, but I can't stand the pearl clutching from the professional sports world at the idea that someone's son that maybe isn't as good as their dad will have more than they maybe earned, because that's what's been happening since the beginning of time. Like a third of sports teams and coaches are ran by families. Marty Schottenheimer's son is a head coach right now. I don't even know that dude's name. I know his last name is Schottenheimer though. But let's table the dad talk for a second and get back to Shadur compared to his peers, because that's where we really get to see the actual racism in play. And people clearly aren't wise enough to catch this. People are like, well, Shadur was too arrogant to work out and he didn't take interviews seriously while other QBs did, and he didn't throw at the combine like other QBs did. No, they didn't. Multiple players that got drafted well ahead of Sheduer Sanders did not work out at the combine. All they did was interview and maybe do 1 or 2 drills. So there's rumors that in those interviews, Shadur came off arrogant, and it does seem like one of those people that he came off arrogant to was Giants coach Brian Daboll. But I have to wonder how much of this is Shadur actually being a dickhead, and how much of it is people projecting that on him because he's a black man who wasn't taught to shrink in front of right people. By the way, the quarterback that the Giants actually took, Jackson Dart, here's what he looked like talking to John Gruden in this meeting.
Stand up. Let me see your snap count. Let me be honest with me, because I See at USC, I see this guy.
You ready?
Yeah. No, I want to hear the snap count.
Yeah.
Do you have like a dummy clap or anything?
Yeah, we call it purple.
What's that? No shit.
Yeah.
So you tell me if this meeting was all that important. To me, this is related to something that Arian Foster made in one of my older videos about football. A lot of y'all motherfuckers didn't watch. In that players become character problems, not specifically because they do crime and do really fucked up shit. Those players are often protected and kept into the system until they get caught. No, character problem players are players that the coaches have to treat like equals, or they demand to be treated better and not be yelled at and cursed and screamed at. It is possible that Shadur didn't do those interviews well, and I'll come back to that. I do believe that. But I can't not recognize that there's always a bias against black players coming in and not being humble enough to some of these teams. People don't understand that so much of racism is biases that you don't even know you have. And I've seen this play out. I knew the scrutiny and hate for Sheduer Sanders was getting weird when I saw a tweet about a video between him and the #1 QB in the draft, Cam Ward. And the tweet's caption reads, Sheduer Sanders trash talking Cam Ward's game. But when you watch the video, it's actually Cam Ward trash talking Sheduer Sanders.
They gave you a completion percentage award, and all you did was throw check downs and bubble screens. That's actually crazy. If I did that, my completion percentage would be 90. Get water, we ain't even done with the first drill. Let's go. That's how it is in Colorado, though. Inside the numbers, top. That's what it's like for a 9-win man.
Now, I don't know, maybe this professional journalist, I guess, can't tell Shadur and Cam Ward apart, but I don't believe that was the case. I believe this person knew that by making that the tweet, that there will be people already primed to tear Shadur down because they don't like how Shadur acts, because he's not supposed to be entitled to act like that. This tweet is still up, by the way. It has not been deleted, even though it's dead wrong. And now there's like a community note correcting it, and there's people at the top of, the tweets saying that this is dumb and wrong. But I remember when it first happened, and most of the people in the comment section were tearing Shadur down for something he literally did not do. And to date, this tweet has almost 20,000 likes and 1,000 shares. This tweet being up with no correction is not an accident, it's a choice. Folks understand, going all the way back to Muhammad Ali, that a certain type of black presentation will always produce a specific type of reaction from white people. And that's the type of black person that seems like they don't care about white people's approval.
Answer the question.
Yeah, when he was like 112 pounds.
Just answer the question.
Because he turned pro when he was a teenager.
Did Pacquiao have he been knocked out twice?
Yeah, like a decade ago.
Answer the question.
A decade ago.
And just answer. I don't care if it's 100 years ago. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Have Pacquiao been outboxed by Eric Morales?
What, one fight he lost to him?
Answer the question.
Yes, he did.
Has he been outboxed by Eric Morales?
Yes.
That's all I need to know.
So why would you fight him?
Ask you another question.
So why not fight him right away?
Now I want to ask you another question.
If he's that easy.
Now I want to ask you another question.
Go ahead.
Who's beating me?
Nobody's beating you
Act
yet.
like that as a black man, white people will hate you, especially if you're good at whatever it is you do. Now, this is not to shade Cam Ward. He's a baller, he's a great prospect, I wish him well, and I love his story of perseverance in the face of adversity and not getting enough opportunities. He was from a small town in Texas, both his parents are in the picture, but his future in the NFL, that's gonna be transformative for his entire family. There are countless players like Cam coming from hard backgrounds using sports to transform their trajectories. And he should be rewarded and celebrated for that. But understand the NFL loves those types of stories and tells them all the time because they contribute to a specific narrative and image of blackness that always exists below whiteness. Yes, stories like Cam's are inspirational, but they are meant to reaffirm how black men should be seen in this country. Docile, grateful for the benevolence of white people, magical even in their special talents and the things they can do, but definitely not a threat. Not someone who might rock the boat or shock the system that they're forced to participate in. So no, just because Cam Ward and Jalen Milroe are black, that does not invalidate the racial aspect of this, because they represent a type of black man who has always been allowed a level of access to white power in America. I'm not calling them sellouts, they're just too talented to ignore and exclude, but they are either willing to or just naturally conform to the way that the NFL wants their league to look. This is the reason why Lamar Jackson has always faced weird, low-key racist scrutiny, while Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, both of whom he is much better than, Super Bowl and playoff wins notwithstanding, but they have never been disrespected in the same way that Lamar Jackson is. And Lamar Jackson, like Shadur, is not disrespectful, is not a off the field problem, is a leader, has not gotten into any trouble, but you can tell when these white reporters talk to Lamar that he does not feel like he needs to be grateful in their presence. From his perspective, they should be grateful to be in his, and they resent him for that. And this is not new. In 2011, when Cam Newton was the obvious first round pick for the NFL, there was an interview where the then owner of the Panthers talked about the way they wanted him to present to the world.
In a recent interview on The Charlie Rose Show on PBS, the 75-year-old Richardson recounted a conversation he had with the 22-year-old Heisman Trophy-winning quarterback on April 4th, in which he asked Newton if he had any tattoos or piercings. When Newton replied, "No, sir, I don't have any," Richardson told Rose he told the quarterback, "Good, we want to keep it that way. Don't change your personality, it'll be good for the team. I could do without the tattoos though." In the Charlie Rose Show interview, Richardson also said that Newton said he was thinking about growing out his hair. Richardson said he responded, "I think you have a very nice haircut." Ugh.
Cam went on to have a very successful career in the NFL, but at a certain point after this, he realized something that every black person should understand, especially if you're watching what's happening to Shadur, but you really should know this before you leave high school.
At what point was it for you that you were just like, you know, fuck them, I'm gonna do me, I'm gonna be my total self, caring less about what people think?
Rebellious bug.
Yeah.
Right after the Super Bowl, that's when I had my revelation that I'm still a nigga. Like, if you remember that year, they were making it a big fuss about celebrating. And if you go back in the backstory, when we played the Cowboys, was I did like the twist, right? But that was me saying, I'm gonna do a dance that y'all know. I had a clean shave, I had the ball fade, I had this, but still to y'all eyes, I'm still a nigga. Bro, you win your way, I win my way. Like, there's multiple ways to win though. Yeah. You feel me? Like, that's what makes us unique. So after the Super Bowl year for me, I started realizing, like, bro, whether I got a haircut and trying to blend in or not, y'all still gonna look at me like I'm the nigga, so I might as well just be who I really am.
So yes, going into this draft season, Shadur and Deion have not moved like many high-end NFL prospects have moved, and it has turned people off. And I get that, but that is the racial component at work. Racism isn't just being mean to a black person and calling him the N-word. It's an entire structure of power meant to control and dictate the way black people are expected to behave and keep us away from access to power in ways that don't happen to white people. So yes, maybe teams were turned off, but why were they turned off? Was it because of arrogance and entitlement? Eli Manning was far more entitled than Sheduer Sanders. He ended up being the first overall pick. His father was even more direct and demonstrable in the media that he didn't want his son playing for certain teams. Deion maybe said it on a podcast, right? Archie Manning said it to the news. He said it to the team's face, basically, multiple times, named them outright. I don't want my son going to the Chargers. How is that so different? Nobody's mentioning that right now. Yes, Deion Sanders is not looked at with the same level of talent as Eli has, but again, going back to my first section, dropping to the 5th round makes no sense. And by the way, if it's an issue of character, understand the NFL has literal sex criminals, including a quarterback on the Browns where Shadur was drafted that they gave $250 million to guaranteed after 26 women accused them of sexual assault. Another player with 2 sexual assault cases was taken in the 2nd round. Do I have to remind everyone of Ben Roethlisberger? Even Mike Vick got a second chance in the league, and he did the worst thing possible according to white people, being cruel to dogs.
Was given a 3-year suspended sentence in a unique move to try to hasten his return to the NFL.
Any time in prison is hell.
And notice that after the league sat him down for a year, and then he spent a year in prison, when he came back, he was on that yes sir, no sir timing. The Mike Vick that went to jail is very different than the one that came out. Other white QBs like Johnny Manziel and Ryan Leaf had clear, known off the field issues in the form of substance abuse and still went in the 1st round. So yes, NFL teams don't want to deal with the headache, but they will when it's attached to a valuable talent. And there's so many clear examples of this historically, but the caveat is that they will do it when they know that they have all the power and control in the relationship. And Shadur had enough talent to get drafted much higher, but he didn't show himself to give up enough control. Colin Cowherd had a take on this where I think he's trying to defend the NFL in this situation, but It actually completely proves my point.
Football is very protective and very tribal about its culture. It doesn't want to be basketball where players run the sport, load management. It doesn't want to be that, okay? Football's culture, the brotherhood of it, its family, all their marketing, its family, it matters to them a lot, and they have every right to be prideful and protective of it. But football is not going to let dads tell them what to do.
The NFL let it be known just now that this is their league, their system, their rules. It's not a meritocracy. It's a modern plantation. They'll reward you handsomely if you show them your value. They'll even cover for you if you misbehave. But what they won't stand for is too much of a challenge to their way of being. And they sent a message to Shadur and Deion, or any other player coming in with a few million in the bank already because of NIL funds. The NFL does not stand for National Football League. It stands for nigga fall in line. But with all the race issues out the way, to wrap up, I do want to return to Deion Sanders, starting with his compelling and kind of wonky Hall of Fame induction speech where he told the story about his mother and overcoming obstacles as a poor kid and how grateful he was for the game and how he had to become prime time to get what he wanted.
This game taught me so much about people. It taught me so much about timing. It taught me so much about focus, dedication, submitting oneself, and sacrifices. This game. And I went at this game. I created this image, this thing that you could imagine. You could love him or hate him, but he was prime time. I would pre-rehearse the quotes. I would pre-rehearse the sayings because I knew I had the substance. I knew I had the goods. I knew I had the work ethic, but I needed to secure myself enough that my mama would never have to work another day of her life.
Deion's message of inspiration here is great and important, and I never want it to be lost that Black people need to continue to work hard and resist against forces that hold us back. And inspiration like this is valuable, even if it does have unintended consequences in certain situations. When I come out against the idea of Black excellence, it's not because I don't want Black people to achieve anything. I just want us to know what type of game we're winning at when we actually get to Black excellence status and how that game affects others who maybe aren't as excellent. See, Deion did get it out the mud. He understood the shame of that experience. And in response to that shame, he, in his own words, submitted to the will of the institution that could provide him the riches to transform his life and his mother's life and the lives of his children. But what Deion says here also exposes in the flaw of the strategy that he had for his son. Deion submitted. He may be the best to ever do it at his position, but he still submitted to keep access to do what he was doing. He'll tell you how it almost broke him, that he attempted suicide one year after winning a Super Bowl. He maybe submitted on his own terms, maybe he did it with a lot of swag, but he gave the league a character, he gave them prime, and in return, they gave him resources. Deion played the game. But the rule of the game is not that those resources are earned, but that they're given to him because he gave them something back. And there's an implicit promise that he would never use those resources to come back and threaten the system that gave it to him in the first place. The master's tools will never destroy the master's shed. He was never meant to do anything to threaten the NFL and the NCAA the way he did. He was never meant to expect that his status was going to put his children on the same playing field as the white children that were inheriting the teams that he played for. He made the mistake of thinking that his submission, his sacrifice to the game, would mean that he could have the right to allow his children to skip the game altogether. That's how it works for the sons of rich white men. That's how it worked for Josh Rosen, Eli Manning, and Johnny Manziel. But that's not how it works for us, no matter how excellent you are. And I can't not blame him for not making sure his son understood this. Like, take Jalen Hurts. It's a meme how Jalen Hurts is stoic and robotic at all times, how he doesn't seem to show emotion, always says the right thing, never gets into trouble.
Thank God for the opportunity. Thank Him for giving me focus and resilient and steadfast within it all.
But that's not who Jalen Hurts really is. Jalen Hurts is a fucking Omega. He's a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity from Texas. Some of y'all don't understand what this means, but if you know, you know. This is not who Jalen Hurts is behind closed doors. But his father taught him the game at a high level because his father was not prime time. So he told Jalen something that every parent should be telling their talented Black child. Don't give them white folks any excuse to deny you. Is Jalen Hurts Black excellent? Sure. But again, the reality of black excellence is that it's still subservient to the status quo. Otherwise, it wouldn't be allowed to be excellent in the first place. These systems don't care how talented we are if we are not allowing ourselves to be exploited by the system. You will either submit to the expectations of the system or you will be humbled by the system. That's why, despite being very much a machine for bad takes, Cam Newton was cooking earlier. Under this system, we are still niggas. Even if we fall in line, we are still niggas. And we are expected to stay in line or risk the minimal gifts we're given. So never, ever, I don't care how talented you are, engage with this system uncritically or uncynically. Be cynical at all times. This system does not have your best interests in mind. At best, your interests might converge with the system's, and even then, it will only be for a short period of time. Play the game if you want, but don't play yourself in the process. I can sit here and tell you all day about white supremacy. Y'all know that. But low key, the real culprit here is Deion Sanders. And I wouldn't be doing my job, especially as a father of 2 black boys myself, if I did not point that out. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Light Work.